So, welcome to Authentic Vlogging, a vlog where everything is 100% true, even the lies. It's been another week and it's been good. I've had to sort out some application stuff for the bright side, which has been a bit... Oh yeah, you may not know what the bright side is. So when you do a master's degree in maths like I do, you have to decide towards the end whether you want to join the dark side or the bright side. There are other names for this that you may hear in common speech, but the technical terms are the dark side and the bright side. And so the dark side, both of them are fairly hard to get into, but the dark side is slightly easier but more tempting, whereas the bright side are for the more pure-minded. So I'm hoping to be able to join the bright side, but I've had to fill in some application to see if I'm actually eligible. But let's not dwell on my own personal life, that's boring, so let's get on to something different. If you go to my channel page, you can see that I've updated the background so that there's now a more professional, fancy-looking background that I quite like. So go and look at it and look at how awesome it is and tell me how great I am at using paint.net. It seems like I may have made a little mistake in my last video. I assumed that everyone knew about Lucky Luke, but then I asked some people and it turns out it may only be really popular in continental Europe and may not be as popular in the UK, and I don't know about the US. Maybe you do, maybe you don't know him. Tell me in the comments if you'd like. Anyway, you can look up who Lucky Luke is online if you want to know, but hopefully the video still makes sense. And if you're surprised that there are people in this world who do not know who Lucky Luke is, I can only sympathise with you. I often have a look at other people's channels on YouTube, and there is one thing that consistently brings me down. It's when I see the channel of someone else who is blatantly a worse YouTuber than I am, and who still managed to have way more subscribers than I do. But then there are other times when it's the other way round, and you see someone who is better than you, but doesn't have as many subscribers. And I know it's a vain thing, but to me it cheers me up a little bit by knowing that the world is unjust to everyone indiscriminately. So I'm going to do a quick shout out to someone who has less subscribers than I do, but who, in my opinion, make better videos than I do. His YouTube name is Ovinicus, and he seems to be an English student in Scotland. And I like his videos, I think they're good fun, and I think they're more fun than mine, but he only has 65 subscribers. There's a link in the doobly-doo, but you can also click my hand if you want to go directly to his page. Ha! Hand's gone, too late. So, let's talk about death, shall we? Have you heard the news that you're dead? No one ever had much nice to say. I think they never liked you anyway. Yo, take me from my hospital bed. Wouldn't it be grand to take a pistol to your hand, and wouldn't it be great if we were dead? So in my review of Death with Interruptions, or Death at Intervals, whatever you prefer to call it, I asked you a question about how you think life would look, or our society would look, if there were no such thing as death. And again, what seemed to happen is that I got a lot of the same kinds of answers. So what almost everyone said is that from a practical point of view, death is necessary because, one, if there were no such thing as death, the world would get overcrowded, not to mention that it already is, and two, life would get very boring if you lived forever. Now I agree with those 2 points, but it is as if no one really listened to the second part of the question, which was, if science found a way of eliminating death, then how would society cope? And for the people who did hear that part of the question, most of you said, well, surely society's going to cope. But that's not an answer! You see, what you're saying, if you're saying, well, death is necessary, but then at the same time admitting the possibility of science curing old age, then we would have to enforce death in some kind of way. We would have to kill people. That's basically what you're saying, isn't it? So one particular user, Andin150, a guy that I actually happen to know in real life, posted the most original comment I saw of all of them. He's going to win the award for the most original comment. An empty Tic Tac box. Well done, Andin150. So, what he conjectured was that you would get a society in which death would indeed be an enforced thing, but that it would have got to the point that it still seemed natural, just like natural death seems natural to us, then enforced death would seem natural in that society. So what we're imagining is a society where when people reach a certain age, let's say 200 years, they simply get executed, which by today's moral standpoint would seem immoral, but by that society's standpoint wouldn't. And see, that's a clever comment because it seems far-fetched, but it's original and there's some thought behind it, and I can't immediately see what's wrong. If you think there's something completely and utterly disgusting and distasteful about that kind of society, tell me so, but then tell me why you can have death being necessary and then at the same time not wanting to kill people. This user also raised some other interesting questions, like what does it actually mean that death has been eliminated? Does that mean that if you explode or if you get cut in half, you somehow manage to still stay alive but you just never die? Apparently worms, when they get cut in half, both parts stay alive, and so you end up essentially having two worms from one. So maybe the same things would happen to humans. If you cut them in half, then you'd have the legs running around and the upper body trying to move its way around and both being alive. So I suppose it was kind of an ill-defined question, but you answered it as well as you could. I guess you're all wondering right now, why am I drinking coffee at such a late hour? Or maybe you're thinking, great, another tea drinker. So that's a question actually here very often on YouTube. Tea or coffee? It seems to be this kind of, just like dark chocolate or milk chocolate, it's the kind of thing that you want to know to get to know another person. And this brings me on to a more general point about interesting and interesting and non-interesting questions is what I wanted to say. See, it seems to me that you can split questions into two categories. Of the interesting ones where the answer would actually provide you with some information about the one you're asking, and the ones to which there is a long and reasonable and interesting answer. And then there's the uninteresting questions like tea or coffee, where it doesn't really matter what side you belong to, this isn't really going to tell you anything. And then again, the answers are going to be split into these interesting and uninteresting answers, because the interesting ones are the ones where the answerer elaborate a bit more on the point and try and tell you what his opinion and his meaning are and why and how. And then the uninteresting answer is just the one where the one answering gives a yes, no, or maybe he says tea instead of coffee or coffee instead of tea, and then doesn't elaborate on the point. This applies to most questions being asked here on YouTube, and so you end up with these four cases. There are the interesting questions, interesting answers. These are good to watch because they actually inform you about stuff. Then there's the interesting questions, uninteresting answers, where someone really asks a genuinely interesting question, but then the one who has to answer just goes with a short, yeah, this is what I think. That's really boring, and that's not a very good effort in my opinion. Then probably the most frequent case is uninteresting question, uninteresting answer, where people ask a question like tea or coffee or dark chocolate or milk chocolate, and then the one who has to answer simply says one of the two words, which doesn't help anyone do anything and is really unproductive and completely pointless. Then there's the fourth and final case, which seems to be rarely ever done, and which I think we should turn into a segment. Interesting answers to uninteresting questions. So let's take as an example tea versus coffee. See, I think coffee isn't really good for you in any way. See, what it does for you is it helps you wake up, but then gradually over time the coffee starts having less and less potency, and you basically need coffee in order to wake up, because otherwise you're going to be even more tired than you were before you started drinking coffee. And on top of that, you just get addicted to the coffee. So I think in the long run, I don't see why you drink coffee. On top of that, I think taste is awful. It's really bitter. But then that's my taste, and I'm not going to impose that on others. Then there's tea. Tea is good for you, but I don't like it. I think it tastes like hot water. I do drink tea if I have a sore throat and I know it's going to be good for me, but I know this is going to sound blasphemous as someone living in the UK, but I wouldn't just randomly make myself a cup of tea if I wanted to. So in the end, I don't really think either is enjoyable, and I think the reason people still do find them enjoyable is simply because they have got used to them. And so to defend their kind of choice, they then try and convince others that tea/coffee is the right choice. So what's my final answer? Neither. This is heated soy milk. This is going to be the last vlog I'll ever make, because next week is going to be the 4th of November and you can't make a vlog on the 4th of November, and after that, well, there's really no point anymore, is there? So it's been good. Thanks for watching.